Good afternoon, Mr. Falabi. Good morning, sorry.
Hey, is everybody here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm ready when you are.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me clearly. Jane Mahadi, and I'm the moderator for today's session. Today is the week 3 of JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship program on the energy industry. And the topic for today is energy crisis, its impacts, and possible solution. Today we have 3 mentors, Victoria, Adu, and Miss Obo. I'll be making a few announcements before we jump into the program for today. Kindly permit me to share my screen. So we'll be talking about the program. JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program is a quarterly program for students and young professionals in Africa and across the world. Mentees are afforded the opportunity to access valuable advice, training, network, mentorship, internship, discussion forum, industry updates, and resource materials from experienced mentors. The program seeks to encourage continuous training, development, and evolution in Africa and around the world. You can watch our videos by searching for JIIPCC on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and other social media platforms. Some of the objectives of the program is to provide easy access, guidance, training, and resource materials for students and young professionals in Africa, to facilitate dialogue and network among experienced and less experienced practitioners and stakeholders, to transform mentees into mentors and leaders for the next generation, and to facilitate further mentorship, internship, scholarship, and job placements for the mentees. That's what JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program is all about, and some of our objectives. I'm also making an announcement that JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program is currently soliciting for mentees for its next quarter, which is the 3rd quarter, on courses like entertainment, basically blockchain, NFTs, and metaverse, and the intellectual property. So you are encouraged to share the flyer with your friends and the link, and colleagues that are interested in either of the topics. And finally, JIIPCC Mentorship also provides a 30-minute one-on-one mentorship session with your favorite JIIPCC mentor. You can register with the link on the picture on your screen. You get to meet your favorite mentor and get hacks, secrets, live lessons, and direction from your favorite mentor. That's the announcements for today. I'll be going straight to the mentor's profile. I'm starting with Mr. Etula Adu's profile. Etula Adu is MSc, MNSE, Oil and Gas, Industry Expert, Technology, Washington, D.C., USA. MSc in Petroleum Technology from Perside University, UK. B Engineering in Petroleum Engineering from Bukin University, Russia. 10 years plus experience in energy industry expert and global voice on international energy geopolitics. He worked with major IOCs in Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Etulan Adu. Our next mentor is Mr. Afolabi Ojosu. Mr. Afolabi Ojosu is a manager, legal and corporate service at Smile Communication Nigeria Limited. Has particular experts in telecommunications and energy projects development, regulation and policy. He has advised governments, operators, and investors development of on-grid and off-grid power projects, metering service offshore, oil and gas exploration, production facilities, utilities, and infrastructure. He is a key electricity market expert. Mr. Afolabi is a former legal advisor to the Nigerian Association of Energy, Economics, and the doctoral candidate at the Center for Petroleum Energy, Economics, and Law of the University of Ibadan. Prior to joining Smile, Mr. Afolabi has held contract and corporate advisory role at Ikeja Electricity PLC, Kauri Partners, and Nigeria Electricity Regulation Commission, and the Enugu State Minister of Justice. He is an avid author and has been published in acclaimed academic, legal, and business publications. Thank you very much today, Mr. Afolabi Ojosu. I'll be reading a statement of profiles. So I'll be calling on our mentors to give us an overview and introduction to the topic for today. I can see Mr. Afolabi on the call and Ms. Egbongo Obo. So I'll start with Mr. Afolabi. Mr. Afolabi, good morning, sir. The floor is yours to give us an introduction and overview on the topic for 15 minutes. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I was thinking I was going to be the one to go last, but then I think the Bible says the last shall be the first, or the first shall be the last. Mm-hmm. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I can't share my video with you. I'm joining you from Manchester, United Kingdom this morning. I had to quickly travel.
Okay.
Right. So apologies for that. And I'm going to be talking to you about the energy crisis, impact, and possible solutions. I have a couple of questions here from the mentees, and I've also seen their presentation. So let me just give you a brief introduction. All right. When we talk about energy crisis, what comes to mind? All right. It means that there is a coming global crisis that we need to look at avoiding. Because where we are today and the impact that the current energy sources we're using have caused to the climate is not where we used to be before. We hear of people saying there's climate change everywhere. There is fire, there is flooding. In some places, there is cold. All of these are impacts of the energy sources that we've been using. So from petroleum or fossil fuels in general, to even nuclear power, every aspect of energy has its downside. But are there solutions to this? Yes, there are solutions to this. Can we begin to adopt cleaner sources of energy? Instead of firing coal, can we begin to use solar? Can we begin to use wind? These are the questions and the issues that calls for discussion today. How do we look at the impacts? How do we begin to prefer solutions for the next generation? Because if we don't solve this problem in this generation, there would be no next. The opposite sides of both spectrum. And the causes is based on the changing weather patterns, based on fossil fuel in the atmosphere. So we would examine these issues, we would look at them, and we'll look at the way forward. And then I'll answer the questions for the class at the end of the presentation, their presentation. Thank you very much. Hussein, back to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for that brief introduction. I'll be calling on our second mentor to also give us a brief introduction before we move on to our mentees' presentations for today. Ms. Egbongo Obo.
Hi, good morning.
The floor is yours. Good
Okay.
morning, ma'am.
Good morning. How you doing? How's everyone? Good morning, Afolabi and Nebuchi, Angel, and Hadi. Good morning. Yeah, sorry, my voice sounds a bit, so sorry about that.
It's very okay, ma.
Oh, okay, yeah, so sorry, I just got a message this morning about my profile and picture and all. So just a brief background about I'm a lawyer, and I recently did my MBA dissertation in the area of energy transition because I work in-house for green energy as company secretary and manager legal. So we're an upstream oil and gas company, but we're also an integrated energy company. So tying that into the topic of our discussion, ordinarily, in the course of producing oil and gas resources, you would have gas flare. And what gas flare does is it contaminates the environment, it contributes to global warming, and of course, it reduces the quality of life generally by negatively impacting the environment. So that's the reason, or generally the reason, why there's been calls for at least 50 years, for an end to oil and gas exploration. Now, based on those calls for an end to oil and gas exploration, especially from the global north being countries in Europe, the UK, and you can also say the US. So there have been a lot of calls for an end to oil and gas exploration because of the changes in the environment. The earlier speaker talked about climate change. The earlier speaker talked about climate change and the impact. There's the Paris climate change goals that says that if the world gets more than 2 degrees Celsius hotter, then it's not going to be able to survive, or the world is not going to be able to take us all. In other words, our existence is threatened by the continuous warming of the environment. And that is why people have been saying no to oil and gas exploration. So what the companies who are in that business, what do they do? So a lot of companies have now stopped, producing their oil and gas assets. In fact, funding for oil and gas projects became a problem. So most companies stopped funding their oil and gas assets. They weren't doing new explorations. And you know how it is with basic economics. Once supply is low, the price goes up. And that's really what we saw. And then coupled with COVID, coupled with some political issues, with Ukraine and Russia, which we could talk about later, in the course of this discussion, we've found ourselves in an energy crisis where the price of energy has gone so high, we can hardly meet demand, and the renewable or green sources of energy that we would, that people have been saying, or the global north has been pushing for people to adopt and to shun fossil fuel, sources. Those sources can't support like base load power, not, and then the equipment or the gadgets or the gear or, simple things that we use, our TVs, our ACs, our fans, our irons, they were not designed for a renewable energy power source. They were designed for the conventional, crude oil meaning generators, gas-fired power plants and stuff like that. So we found ourselves in a situation pretty much where we've stopped producing oil and gas to meet global demand. And then the renewable energy isn't sufficient to meet global demand. So you have a crisis, essentially. And I think that's part of what we'll be talking about. Of course, the impact, once the price of energy goes up, everything goes up. In Nigeria, it's pretty standard. Once they change the pump price of PMS, the next day, if your transportation was 200 naira, for example, from Gwarimpa to Wuse, it becomes 250 or 300. The prices of things in the market automatically goes up. So that then creates a cost of living crisis, not just everywhere globally, because the price of energy, is something that impacts everyone across the globe. So I don't know if that's okay as an introduction, but that's pretty much what the energy crisis is about. And the energy crisis is being faced by those at the top, big countries, the global north. We are even feeling it a lot more here in Nigeria. The hardship has, tripled, and you can link this hardship to the energy crisis, situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Egongo Obo. I hope I pronounced that
Just say
correctly. Igongo. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It was very insightful and educative. I'll give the floor to our presenter for today. We have just one presenter for the energy group to share his slides and also make his presentation. Kindly note that you have 15 minutes. Joel, you can start now.
Hello, good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but your voice is very low, please.
Oh, okay.
I think it's your earpiece. If you're using an earpiece, your headphones.
Now, can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, So, good day, everyone. I am Joel Nibiti, and I'm going to be the presenter for today. And the topic is energy crisis, impact, and possible solutions. Now, as a word of introduction, energy crisis is the depletion of non-renewable concentrated sources of energy. Now, putting it in a simpler way, in a layman's understanding, it can be any blockage in delivering of energy in an economy. That's what basically energy crisis means, and it can be caused by inadequate power generation and also high costs of technology. high cost of technology. And Nigeria, the major energy crisis facing Nigeria is the inadequate power generation capacity. So like I mentioned, it is inadequate power generation capacity is the main issue contributing to the energy crisis we have in Nigeria. And just like Ms. Obo said, that energy crisis can be suffered by both those at the top, that's countries, and also the average human beings. Now, let's look at the impact of energy crisis. Now, energy crisis, it can impact different areas, and let's look at the economic impact. And the energy crisis has significant impact on the economy. It has significant impact on the economy. And as a matter of the basic principle of economics, the basic principle of demand in economics, when there is an increase in the price, this will lead to a decrease in the quantity demanded. So when there is an increase in the price of these energy sources, when there is an increase in the price, the quantity demanded by the consumers, by the customers, it will be reduced. There will be a massive decrease in the quantity demanded, just like what our former speaker mentioned. It is a fundamental principle of demand in economics. And then the cost of production, when there is an increase, when the energy price increases, the cost of production increases, and this will definitely affect how the consumers will spend their money in trying to get these goods and services. Now, going to the environmental impact, the use of fossil fuels is the primary source of energy production globally. And by burning these fossil fuels, it releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which leads to climate change, global warming, and all that, which we have already discussed in our previous sessions. So energy crisis has a very big impact on the environment. It has a very big impact. It also reduces life. By these emissions in the atmosphere. It affects the environment which human beings live in. And as a result of the environment being adulterated by these fuels and this energy that are being emitted, the lifespan is critically reduced. So going to the solution to this energy crisis, the main thing is identifying the problem, and then another thing is giving viable solutions. The first thing is improving energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is the process of reducing the amount of energy required to provide products and services. For instance, insulating a building. Insulators we see in a building. Insulating a building allows it to use less heat and cooling energy in order to achieve a thermal comfort. So making use of efficient energy will also help to ameliorate the energy crisis that we suffer. And also, we talked about the environmental impact of energy crisis, in that the fossil fuels and the impact it has. So a solution to that is the use of non-renewable energy sources. We already discussed that in our previous sessions. So the use of non-renewable energy sources will definitely help to reduce the impact of fossil fuels in our environment, and then release of greenhouse gases, which will help to reduce the rate of climate change that we are experiencing. And then another viable solution is energy conservation. Energy conservation will help to reduce energy crisis. This involves the use of using less energy consumption by using less energy intensive appliances. For instance, the use of energy saving bulbs. It's instead of using the typical yellow bulbs that we are used to, we can make use of energy saving bulbs. And then when we are not making use of appliances, like we're not making use of the sockets, we're not making use of the extensions, we can switch them off, and this will also help to conserve the energy that we have. And also, the government has a very important part to play. the government has an important part to play. The government have to implement policies to mitigate the effects of energy crisis. Then we look at the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan. So in a bid, I just mentioned that the government has a part to play by implementing policies. So the Nigerian government has tried to take that step by launching the Energy Transition Plan, which aims to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2060. Yeah, so this is the part Nigerian government has played, even though that there are risks involved, definitely, even though there are risks involved, to achieve big things, you have to take big risks. So even though there are big risks involved, which could lead to unemployment of persons who work in these industries and make use of the fossil fuel, the impact of this, of implementing this transition plan it can never be overemphasized. So it is important that the government apply and enforce this transition plan, which they have already started. And then, as a way of conclusion, let me also refer to what Ms. Obai so much have an interest in her class. She just mentioned that there is a call for an end to oil and gas exploration as a result of the change in environment by these world powers. So as a result of that, the attention has been changed to non-renewable sources. Yeah, every industry is trying to go green, trying to find viable energy sources that will not harm and have a negative impact on the environment. So for the energy transition plan to be fully activated by 2060, which is the part Nigerian government is trying to play, it would require financial investment from the public and private stakeholders, as it is a major constraint. Yeah, finance is a major constraint for that. And then the lack of technological equipment. The lack of technological equipment is also a setback. So where all these things are put into consideration, I believe that the negative impact of this energy crisis will be mitigated and reduced to a great extent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel, for that wonderful presentation on behalf of the Energy Group. Personally, for me, I believe your slides were rich and very informative. We'll hand over to our mentors to make comments on the slides and also correction and their final comments on the topics for today. So I'll be calling on Mr. Afolabi to go first again. Mr. Afolabi, please. So we can't hear you clearly. No, I don't know. Can we all hear Mr. Afolabi? No, I can't hear you clearly. It's not better, so I don't know if you are making use of an earpiece. Maybe you will remove it. Yeah, okay. Mr. Afolabi has left the call. Yes, we can hear you now, sir, but your voice is also echoing.
All right, I think this is better now.
Yeah, it's better now.
All right. So first and foremost, I'd like to say a big thank you to the mentees for doing justice to that topic. Energy crisis can be a bit tricky, especially when you're looking at transitioning. So it's a very, very tricky topic when you're looking at transitioning. First, he has given us the introduction on, especially as regards the depletion of non-renewable concentrated sources of energy. A lot of people really don't know this, but fossil has a timeline. Sooner or later, we're going to run out of fossil fuel. Sooner or later, we're going to run out of fossil fuel. What happens when we run out of fossil fuel? Is the sources of fossil so immeasurably large that we're not going to run out one day? The answer is no. Even the oil and gas industry measures the availability of fossil based on the number of proven reserves in a country. So you hear this XYZ country has XYZ barrels of oil in reserve or in proven reserve based on the exploration they've done. But sooner or later, we'll run out of this. And then where do we turn to? For Nigeria, like he has said, the energy crisis is being driven by the production of power. However, we still do not have power today. If we say we want to transition energy in Nigeria, we have to look at the cost of technology vis-a-vis the cost of investment and the demand before we can say we want to look at transitioning. And the impact of this on the Nigerian populace is so huge that you can fit an entire economy into it. If we were to have energy in Nigeria today, if we were to have proper energy in Nigeria today, imagine living in a world where your children do not know what UPNEPA means. I'm sure a lot of us here growing up, once there's power from the disco, the first thing we shout was UPNEPA. And imagine growing up without your children knowing what UPNEPA is. That is the impact of the energy crisis in Nigeria today. And that is the solutions that we need to propose to make sure that the next generation don't have to shout UPNEPA like us. So I believe that he has done justice to it. And a big thank you to Megede, Rita, Joel, and Emmanuel for a job well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Falabi, for that contribution and comments. I'll call on Ms. Obo to also give her own contribution and comments. Over to you, Ms. Obo.
Sorry, I had my stuff in mute. Okay, quick one. Just to follow up on what Afolabi said, I think it's a very interesting conversation around the depletion of fossil fuels. I have a different, view of that. Again, I feel that it's a very contentious issue in terms of it's debatable. There are beliefs on both sides about whether fossil fuels are actually going to deplete. Because, and this is the argument on the other side, and I'm sitting in the middle, but I'm just presenting both arguments just so that, we can then take a decision one way or the other, what we will choose to believe. Yeah, so the fact that, it's a fact that, yes, we've been producing these assets for, a long time. And based on the proven reserves, the more you produce the assets, your recoverable volumes would reduce. So to that extent, yes, the reserves are depleting, and at some point we wouldn't have fossil fuel. But we also need to think about the fact that fossil fuels, it's like a naturally occurring, what's it called? Is it like a naturally occurring phenomena, or it's a naturally occurring item, for lack of a better word. So as long as, how they say it, seed time and harvest, as long as the earth remains, fossil fuels will continue to be formed on the ground. That's the first point. The second argument on the other side is, for example, 10 years ago, if you wanted to find out what you had in your assets, your reserves, you probably need to do like a 2D or a 3D seismic data acquisition. Today, technology has improved where you can get better data of your oil or gas reserves. And with better data, better ability to interpret that data, if it was going to be, for example, 5 million barrels reserves in a particular asset, with better data and better interpretation of the data, you might realize that what you have is not 5 million, it's 20 million. So the technology in that aspect is improving. Now, the third point also is the fact that the technology also for recovering the reserves in the asset is also improving. So technology is getting smarter. It's making it easier. For example, if you had a 5 million barrel reserve, for example, maybe your recovery factor will be 20% or maybe 30 or maybe 40 or 50, depending on the terrain and the quality, you know, of the oil or the gas in that particular reserve. But today, with technology, a field that had maybe a 20% recovery factor can actually have a 30% or 40%, the recovery factor being optimized based on the use of technology. So to that extent, I can see reason why certain people would argue that fossil fuels are not going anywhere. However, back to the point, you know, Afolabi made as well, there is definitely an environmental issue and there is an environmental challenge. And if we do not take steps to stop this business as usual approach that we've been taking, oil and gas companies have been taking, even consumers, government, you know, financiers and the key players in this sector, if we continue with this business as usual approach, then we are going to, you know, just continue to, we shouldn't expect that the environmental issues would, you know, just go away just because we're not paying attention. It's going to get worse. We are going to have, you know, serious things like floods. We're going to have things like excessive wildfires, like just the things that we've been used to see for a bit, but now we're seeing more often. We're going to be having serious environmental issues in terms of also the quality of life, you know, of the people who live in these communities where oil and gas is being explored. So that's just one other side I wanted to bring to the point he made around the depletion of fossil fuel resources. Then specifically on the presentation, hold on, I just want to pull that out. Again, thank you, Joel, for the presentation, and thank you for the team for the very well done, a job well done. Generally on just I like the presentation, like I like the pictures and the text and everything. So that's just a general overview because I'm very particular about like how text and stuff, you know, is put in a document, and I liked the way it was done. So thank you for that. Now going to the content. Again, this is a discussion because I'm still learning, you know, this area, but from what I know, the energy crisis is not restricted to depletion of non-renewable sources. So it is not a depletion of non-renewable, meaning non-green, meaning fossil fuel or coal or whatever, you know, other non-green source there is. That's not what creates the energy crisis, in my opinion. What creates the energy crisis is the inability of the energy sources available to meet demand. That's what creates the crisis. Because if there's a depletion of non-renewable sources, but you then have a ramping up of renewable sources to meet the demand, then we wouldn't have a crisis. So the point is the depletion of the non-renewable concentrated sources of energy alone is not, you know, the only element in the energy crisis. Yes, it is a factor contributing to the energy crisis, but that's not what sums up the energy crisis that we're currently experiencing. Then the issue about the energy, the overview of that's your next slide on the overview of energy crisis in Nigeria. And you said the major issue contributing to energy crisis in Nigeria is the inadequate power generation capacity. Again, this is one lens, to look at the energy crisis. Yes, when we don't have power generation, because inadequate power generation, it contributes to the crisis. But the point I just wanted to make here is the major issue contributing to energy crisis. The energy crisis, okay, in Nigeria, okay, I think because I was taking it back to like the global impact on the price of, crude oil, and how that creates an increase in the cost of what's it called, oil and gas, PMS, because energy is not just quote unquote power. Energy is fueling your car, energy is gas, to cook. So it's beyond, I think that's the point I'm trying to make here. It's beyond just power, generation. It's also what's the cost of PMS. That's a key factor as well when you're looking at the energy crisis in Nigeria, because as the price of the crude in the international market increases, the pump price here also increases. And, it's all part of the interplay of the factors that are causing this rise in price and the concurrent energy crisis and cost of living crisis that we are experiencing. Your next slide talks about the impact of energy crisis. Yes, I agree with you. Economic impact, we've talked about energy prices rise, cost of production increases. I think that was spot on. The environmental impact as well. That's also, very spot on. I totally agree with that. For your solutions, yes, I found this also very interesting, the solutions that you have proposed. I like the idea of energy efficiency. And you can see, let's just bring it back home. There was a time we would go to the market and buy regular bulbs, right, to light up our homes. But right now, you most likely go to the store to say, oh, I want this LED power saving bulb. People are getting smarter, and it's only going to get better. We're also getting smarter because we're having to pay, the cost of units from AEDC. I'm based in Abuja. From AEDC has, gone up significantly. So you now monitor your consumption much more than you used to in the past. So I agree with you on the point of energy efficiency and energy conservation as well. So if you don't need it, which is also linked to efficiency, well, conservation in my mind would be, if you don't need the lights on, turn it off, not just because you wouldn't have units, but because the power you don't use or the power you don't waste is power that could be used by someone who actually needs it. So that's another way to look at it. I also agree with the point around government intervention as well. So, because the idea of energy is also like a security issue. So it's not something that can be left completely in the hands of the private sector. So government policy is required to drive measures or to drive solutions that can actually mitigate, like you said, the effects of the energy. I also found the energy transition plan, quite useful. Yes, we have an energy transition plan, and from the oil and gas sector, what we would usually say is that gas is our transition fuel. So ordinarily, they are the proponents of leave the oil in the ground, don't do anything about crude oil production, stop crude oil production. But think for a moment that globally, and I wanted to show a slide. I don't know if it's okay to share my screen. I just wanted to show this picture to buttress the point I was trying to make. If that's okay. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, this is it. Can you see?
Yes, we can see your
Okay.
screen.
Yeah, so this is again, like I said, I did my MBA dissertation on how corporate survival is a long story, but how corporate survival and reputation is driving oil and gas companies to transition. But part of the concerns about a Nigerian company or Nigerian oil and gas company transitioning is around the issue of consumption and contribution. So you can find that the rest of the world, this is Africa, this is the rest of the world. So in 2020, the cumulative contribution of Africa, look at it, is less than 3%. Look at the rest of the world in terms of tons of CO2, gigatons of CO2 released into the air. It's incomparable. So to think that our response to the energy crisis or the energy transition should be equal or measurable, I think it's unjust and it's insensitive to the unique socioeconomic situation of most African countries. If you tell Nigeria to stop producing crude oil, which is the main stay of the economy, how are we going to fund our budget? How are we going to how are we going to fund our budget? We can't fund our budget. We can hardly fund our budget with the current production that we have, right? And we can even hardly meet our production targets based on what, our quota, based on, the OPEC quotas and all. We can hardly meet it for many reasons: vandalism, sabotage. We have so many issues. So if you say stop crude oil production, have you thought, these are the guys who need to really stop. These guys, the rest of the world, the global north, they're the ones who need to, we've not even scratched the surface when it comes to either energy consumption or contribution of CO2 emissions. So the response to the energy transition cannot be equal. It can't be equal. It has to be commensurate to your contribution. So these guys are the ones that need to lead the transition. They should stop, turning on. Have you seen their homes? They have so many gadgets. They have so many things they use. We barely have, one bulb or one TV or one fridge, in our homes. So they are the ones who need to really lead that charge. They are the ones who are, really advanced, who have a lot of machines, who have a lot of gadgets. They need to lead the transition. And for Africa, or bringing it back to Nigeria, again, we would say that our transition fuel is gas. So the country is now focused in terms of our energy transition plan more on building our gas reserves, ensuring zero gas flare, or improving our production processes. I think I'm out of time, right? I can see you giving me some signs. Just let me know if I'm out of time, because I can go on and on. But our transition fuel is gas. And yes, we do have a transition plan that the government, is implementing, but it's not going to be as radical, and we should not expect it to be as radical as what, we have with the other companies in the global north. So generally, those are my comments on the presentation that you have made. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Obo. We would have loved to continue listening to you, the possible solutions to the energy crisis, and how impactful Nigerian is, and Africa as a whole is, and how the global north being the main factors to that, the crisis. So before we take the questions for today, we'll be taking a quick pictures of everyone on the call. We do post what we've learned on our social media platform, tagging our friends that we were on JIIPCC platform today, and we discussed the topic for today. So I encourage everyone, our mentors and mentees, to put on their videos. We'll take a quick screenshot for 30 seconds before we move on to the question and answer session. Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, please let's just smile for the camera. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. Okay, I've taken a few screenshots, so I think we can move on to the question and answer right now. So I just pasted the question on the chat box. I will start taking the questions. And the first question is for Mr. Afolabi. I think he also mentioned something about it during his introduction of the topic. So is energy transition across the globe indeed achievable? That's the question number one.
All right. So the first question is energy transition achievable across the globe? The answer to that is yes. And the drivers of that is what I'm going to call policy. All right. Government policy ranging from government to government. The tariff principles concerning energy as a whole, from gas to crude oil to electricity, right, that is produced. And then the final part is regulation, all right? If we are able to achieve this, all right, then we can begin to talk about the energy transition on a global scale. So if this should happen, you would have a global energy sector shift from fossil-based system of energy productions and consumption, including oil, natural gas, and coal, to renewable sources like wind and solar, as well as lithium-ion batteries. In short, in most countries in the world, everybody says lithium is the new oil, because that's what powers battery vehicles, from your Tesla to every other battery powered vehicles that you have. And I've really seen the adoption of battery powered vehicles in the Americas and in Europe. So this would definitely cause a global cascading effect. Secondly, to achieve this, we need to have technology adoption. A lot of people are quite wary of the technology behind these things. For instance, if I was a Nigerian and I had a battery-powered vehicle, the first question I would ask myself is does the national grid have enough power for me to even charge my vehicle? If the national grid does not have enough power and we have to put on generators in our homes to power such vehicles, why do you want to use a battery-powered vehicle when you don't even have a good national grid? So first, we must get the basics right. We must get the base load right. And unlike a lot of people that will say fossil fuel is dirty, not all fossil fuels are dirty. Gas is clean. Gas is clean. Gas is very, very clean fuel. In short, I would take gas-powered fired power plants before nuclear power plants. So yes, it is achievable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Afolabi, for the answer to the question number one. I'll be calling on Ms. Obo to take the question number two. What are the measures that must be put in place to make energy transition a reality? And the second question is for Ms. Obo.
Yeah, okay. So you asked, what are the measures that must be put in place to make energy transition a reality? And I think Afolabi has already touched on that, really, when he spoke about policy and regulation. I think those are important tools to make this transition a reality. But again, because this issue of energy transition is a highly is very political. It's a very political issue. So you need global political will, to really make this happen. You also need private support in terms of the flow of finance, because, and those are two different things, but let me try to link them. Flow of finance, meaning financial institutions that fund oil and gas projects or that fund renewables, they then need to take a decision from their own internal policies about what kind of exposure do we want to the oil and gas sector? What kind of exposure do we want to renewables in a country like Nigeria that's not really been tested? But if we're going to make this shift towards greener sources, then the banks need to be on board to support technology, to support projects that are, headed in that direction. Then in terms of private support, individuals, we need more enlightenment, we need more education on, the damage or the issues, this global climate issues, the environmental issues. If people are aware, then they'll be able to make, better consumption choices about, their energy, about the gadgets they're getting. If people are thinking about environmental issues, climate issues, you probably, when you want to buy a refrigerator or a freezer, you'll be checking out certain things. When you want to get a phone, you might not want to get a phone every year just because there's a new phone, because you're also thinking about how all these things add up from an environmental perspective. So that's education and advocacy and enlightenment from a consumption perspective is important. And that's why when we talk about measures that can be put in place, we would usually categorize them into supply and demand factors. So the supply factors would look at the factors that would dissuade oil companies from continued exploration and production, or that would dissuade them from exploration and production with a business as usual, mindset. So you have certain government policies like gas flare penalties. So for example, before, perhaps a gas flare penalty used to be 20 cents per scoop of gas, you flared. Now it's probably like $2, almost $3. So when you think about that and you add that to your cost of productions, companies are like, hey, wait, I probably would get more money if I find a way to commercialize this gas by maybe having gas solutions, gas to power, gas to LPG, rather than flare the gas, because the penalties for flaring are significant and would definitely hit your bottom line at the end of the day. So the government has put up gas flare penalties. There are also environmental laws and regulations. There's also what we call carbon tax. People are advocating that companies should be made to pay carbon tax, and that is a tax when you're able to calculate what the impact of this gas flare would be. So rather than these oil companies just producing, flaring the gas and selling their crude and moving on with business as usual, the government is like, no, because of the damage you have done to the environment, this is the cost of that damage, pay for that damage. So that's one way that would, that companies would be made to be more responsible and help us, move along in this transition. I've also talked about the demand side, which is about consumer appetite and issues around social education and advocacy and RE compatible devices, things like that. So in my mind, those are the lenses we can use to look at the measures that can be put in place to make this transition a reality.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Obo, for the answer to that second question. I encourage our mentees to ask live question. In case if you have any question, you raise your hand and I'll call on you to ask your question directly to the mentors while I'm also reading the questions that were sent in. The third question is from Mr. Fulabi. What are the factors? Okay, are there factors militating against energy transition across the globe?
All right, so the question is, are there factors mitigating energy transitions across the globe? So when they say militating, all right, that word itself is strong. So, but what I'm going to answer is this: are there factors driving energy transitions across the globe? To that, my answer would be yes. In the interplay of energy, there's something we call the geopolitics of energy. All right. The Russian-Ukraine war, the Nord Stream pipeline explosion, Germany not choosing to buy gas from Russia, the ban on Russia crude oil. These are factors that we call the geopolitics, all right, of energy. And these are also factors that are affecting and impacting the energy transition across the globe. I want to say this. So Egogo, also you have the oil companies also trying to change the narrative out there. So I know she works for an oil company, so apologies for that. You have the oil company trying to change the narrative out there about the impact of oil, all right, on the climate. And not just the impact of oil, the impact of fossil fuels, not the fossil fuels themselves, but the activities and the residue that is left after burning fossil fuel. So fossil fuel themselves are not evil. But if you drive a vehicle and you release carbon monoxide into the atmosphere, then that is where the evil is. And globally, climate change is happening and is being driven by this impact on fossil fuels. And you have the big four companies trying to say, the four sisters of oil, I'll call them, trying to say, okay, let's kill this discourse. All right, let's kill this discourse. It's not been proven that it is fossil fuel that is causing climate change. It's not been proven that the hole in the ozone layer is caused by carbon monoxide or whatever it's caused. And these are the issues that we are having. We have narrative being changed on a daily basis. We have the geopolitics of energy, and then we have the interplay between governments. It's a highly politicized issue in the government. There are governments that don't even acknowledge that climate change exists. So there are governments like the German government that are moving towards a net zero carbon neutral environment. So it depends on the factors that you look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Afolabi. I don't know if Ms. Obo has any contribution to that question.
Because he put me on the spot, right? Yeah, but the truth of the matter is, when it comes to the impact of fossil fuel, and I would say I agree with you to the extent that, yes, oil companies have always known, or they have known for a long time. And there's even a research about Shell scientists that, worked on, in other words, Shell scientists, I think it was about maybe 50 years ago, that already knew about the dangers and how the planet was rapidly warming up, and how they linked that to, a fossil fuel powered economy. So, and they hid that report, and it wasn't until later, and all that. So I agree with you that there's a sense of narrative setting. There's a sense of, creating some kind of uncertainty so that everybody's like, oh, do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? I agree with you. Yes, that is a reality. Companies are spinning certain narratives to suit their bottom lines, and that's a reality, and that's expected because that's what people do. You're always going to try to, it's called self-preservation. But I also think that oil and gas is something where you do not throw away the baby with the bathwater, because oil and gas is solving a critical problem for the society, and that is energy, survival, livelihood. And you shouldn't get stuck on the fact that, oh, these are the problems, and then you forget that these are the benefits. And that is what this whole idea that oil is bad, or gas is, or whatever, fossil fuels are bad, that whole idea and that rapid change to an alternative without actually transitioning, that is what has created the energy crisis. So I think it is important for oil and gas companies that are rethinking, their corporate existence, because if the demand pattern is shifting in the face of all these environmental issues, then companies need to start thinking, am I still going to be here 10, 20 years, 30 years down the line if there is no demand for the product I'm producing? So most companies now, if you look at it, most oil and gas companies are no longer oil companies. They are now energy companies. And the whole narrative is, oh, there's an energy mix. There's oil and gas in that mix, but we also have geothermal power, we have biomass, we have hydropower, we have, like you said earlier, I'll take gas over nuclear energy any day, So we have a lot of components in that mix, and oil and gas companies are now diversifying most of their interests, significant part of their interests, from just being purely E&P focused to being an energy company, incorporating other forms of energy. So that's just my response, agreeing, but also just shedding some light on what companies are also doing. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Obo, for the contribution and the question. I think we have a live question from a mentee on the chat box. Is natural gas same as oil and gas or crude oil? This stems from the fact that natural gas is central for Nigerian energy transition plan. I think Mr. Afolabi can give us an answer to that.
Sorry, just 1 minute. What was the question again?
Okay. He said, is natural gas same as oil and gas or crude oil?
Oh, okay. So when we talk about the entire Nigerian energy, gas plan, I'm sure that's what you're trying to talk about. Looking at the gas to energy, taking gas that is from the flare stack. So if there's any company that wants to flare gas from the flare stack, the federal government has the right to take that gas for free. So, and you want to know if natural gas is the same thing as crude oil. So the answer is no. So natural gas is a byproduct of crude oil. In short, in energy law, so I'm an energy lawyer, as you know. In energy law, we say Nigeria is a gas field. Do you understand me? With little oil. So Nigeria has a whole lot more of gas than crude oil. In short, I think we should even be calling Nigeria a gas producing nation and not an oil producing nation, because we have a lot of gas in abundance. But one of the things that we had with exploration in the 90s was that a lot of these oil companies were interested in only the oil and not in the gas, because they did not have the technology or were not willing to put in place the finance to capture this gas, clean it, all right, either liquefy it, all right, and pump it out. They didn't have those commitments towards that gas. They were much more interested in the crude. And the crude in Nigeria has associated gas. So they're not the same thing, but they are associated, all right? For most of the early oil companies in Nigeria, they will rather just flare the gas at the stack, all right? And then that's where you have gas flaring and the impacts of gas flaring that you have in the Niger Delta today, from acid rain to having communities that are in perpetual daylight because the gas stack, the flare is always on and they're in perpetual daylight, to even having suits all over Warri and Port Harcourt during the daytime. You know, that's the effect of gas flaring. And that's what the Nigerian energy transition in respect to gas is trying to change. And then also the energy transition in respect to gas is also trying to make sure that the power plants we have, because nearly all our power plants, apart from hydro, are gas fired. Only Egbe is dual fired with LPFO, that's low pour fuel oil. All the other gas plants we have are gas fired. So to make sure that we have an abundance of gas to fire those plants. So those are what the energy transition in respect to gas is aimed at. I'll also let Bobo speak on this.
Yeah, thanks, Afolabi. I think you really hit it, spot on. I just want to bring in our own unique example as a company, the company I work for. So what we have is primarily a crude oil field or an oil field, but in that reserve, you would have gas, you would have water, you would have oil. In the course of our production, we would normally have to flare gas, but part of the conditions for the award of the license to our company was to implement what we call small-scale gas utilization projects, requiring us not to flare the gas, but to convert the associated gas from our crude oil production process to LPG, to power. So those are the gas utilization projects that we have supporting our current operations. So to that extent, you can say I can distinguish that kind of asset that is majorly an oil asset, but you have associated gas coming out from your production process, to an asset that is just a gas, what you would call non-associated gas, field. So they are all natural gas. It's just that some reserves are majorly like oil reserves with some gas, and then some reserves are majorly gas reserves, if that answers your question. So it's more about what's the word? Geological composition of that particular reserve, but gas stands on its own, oil stands on its own, and there's also water, so they're all different.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Afolabi and Ms. Obo, for throwing more light on that question. I believe it's well answered. I think the person that asked the question is Emmanuel Ebe. So I hope that answer satisfies your question. I'll be taking the last few questions. This one is for Ms. Obo. Are there any demerits? Okay. Are there any demerits associated with energy transition?
Yeah, I think there are. And I'm looking at it from taking a radical, because your transition can either be gradual or radical. And I'm looking at this again through the Nigerian lens. And I mentioned it earlier. If we let go of oil and gas production in Nigeria and we say tomorrow, shut it down, we are going to create an economic crisis. So that would be a demerit because we will be letting go of a major economic driver for us as a country. I also think that and this is, I'm saying this cautiously because I understand what the implications are. But I also think that if we take a radical approach to energy transition, we might be taking on a European solution to an African or Nigerian problem. So maybe what we should be looking at is how can we make our operations cleaner? Is there a way to improve efficiency? Is there a way to improve not just our operations, but also the products?
Everything in my life.
Sorry?
I had to take.
No,
Okay.
you can go on.
Oh yeah. Is there a way to improve our production process? Is there a way to improve the quality of the products to make them cleaner? So that's like, we're not thinking about solving the problem. We're just thinking about, oh, Americans or Europeans have said no more oil and gas. So we shut down, and we're not thinking about how we can actually solve our own problems with the resources that we have. Because this technology, we're buying it. We don't have renewable energy technology. In terms of the technology, we hardly have that in country. So we are still abandoning the resource, in quotes, that we have, and then we are importing technology. So that's not really solving the problem. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be thinking long-term and about sustainability. You know, that's not saying that we shouldn't think about that. That's just saying, why don't we stop and think about why are we taking, you know, the decision to adopt renewable energy like the West is? Why aren't we thinking about the resources that we have, making our operations greener, at least in the short to mid-term, you know? And why would we let go of a major economic driver and pretty much shut down our economy just because the global north is saying everybody stop producing the oil in the ground? Mind you, because of this Russia and Ukraine crisis, for example, BP is a good example. BP was one of those companies that I think 10, 15 years ago stepped out and they said, we are no longer going to do any new exploration and production. We are going to gradually shut down, you know, our oil and gas business, and we're going to be an energy, you know, transition company. Yesterday, I think it was 2 days ago, BP is going to, you know, a new field in Canada, offshore, and they are drilling new wells. They said they were going to cut down their oil production by 10%, but they've taken a back turn, you know, on those statements, and they're going back to drill new wells that they are thinking of bringing upstream by 2025. Why are those companies doing that? They're doing that because they have an energy crisis problem. And they're changing course. And these were the companies that were, you know, at the forefront saying no to oil, no to oil, no to oil, let's go renewable. And now they're changing course. So you realize that everybody is still trying to figure, you know, what the best approach should be. Are we going to sacrifice, you know, short-term survival for long-term sustainability? These are real issues, you know, that people are asking, and companies and governments and, you know, everybody is still trying to grapple with this situation. So my advice here is, let's not take any drastic approach. Let's not take any radical approach. Let's look internally at the resources we have, you know, and let's make a decision that works for us, because these guys are making decisions that work for their economy. They are reopening their coal plants because there's no gas from Russia, you know, and they're taking all these drastic steps because it suits their economy. So how about we do that as well as Nigerians, not irresponsibly, but responsibly, looking at the resources we have and making decisions that work for us? I think that will be my response to that question.
Thank you very much, Miss Obo. I totally agree with you on that response. I don't know if Mr. Folabi has any contribution to that question also, before we move on to the last question. Mr. Folabi, are you still on the call with us?
So I didn't get that question.
Okay, are there any demerits associated with energy transition? That was the main question initially.
So are there any demerits associated with energy transition? The answer
Yes.
yes. The answer is yes. And the question, like Ogogo said, is this: there are some facilities that require that you have base load electricity generation. For instance, while I used to advise Ikeja Electric, we had companies that were steel companies on the national grid. And each time those steel companies started up productions, you could feel the draw in the frequency of the power that was being supplied. So if you do not have base load, which are basically big generation powered by fossil fuel, you might not be able to have economic sustenance, especially when it comes to companies that need baseload to run. I don't think, and I might be wrong, I don't think technology has advanced to where you can begin to melt steel using solar generated power plants. I don't think we've advanced up to that extent. So there are some basic activities that you need base load to run. You need to run your trams, you need to run your trains, you need to run your steel companies. Basically, you need base load for that. So in this transition plan, it is not all rosy. For instance, Germany extended twice its plan to close down all its nuclear power plants, leaving about 2 nuclear power plants open because they needed that base load generation. As much as they were going green using solar panel, base load was needed for a whole lot of things because after a while you find out that the power plants do not just provide electricity as you know it, which is electricity in megawatts. They also provide what we call heat, which is in megawatts thermal, and these are the factors that are driving it. Finally, demerits, yes. Economic wise, the price of fossil fuel will continue to go up. The price of fossil fuel will continue to go up because the lesser exploration you have, the lesser the supply. And when supply is less, demand goes up. And with more demand goes an increase in prices. You've seen the price of crude go up as high as $120 per barrel in some instances when demands are pushed up. So if you have less crude exploration, you have higher prices. You would also begin to see it affect cost of living. For instance, if you're buying petrol at a liter at 1,500 naira per liter, it would go into every facet of life in Nigeria. You'll see your tomatoes jump astronomically, as we've seen in the case of the increase in the price of diesel in this last year and this year. You see that jump astronomically. Also, in economic terms, you also see an increase in inflation because inflationary principles also begin to come into play. Contracts that were held static would begin to see a variation in prices. You see variation across everything from the price of your cell phone credits to your day-to-day activities because they are all powered by fossil fuel. So if you say you want to stop using fossil fuel, you have to also be ready to pay the big bucks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Falabi, for that contribution, and also Ms. Obo. I'll be asking the last question for today before we end the session. Mr. Falabi can also go first on this one. How well is the world's energy transition being handled? like globally?
So how well is the world's energy transition being handled? It's highly politicized. It's highly politicized. You have, like Egogo said, you have the West telling Africa that you guys need to transition energy, it's causing climate change and all of that. But the West also forgot that they have developed their economies using fossil fuel, all right, at a very cheaper cost. Now you want to tell developing economies not to use that same fossil fuel that you developed to improve your economy, that they should not use it, that they should go for cleaner alternatives. And then you have the Africans on the other end saying, let us develop our own economies first. When we get to where you are, we will also tell other people to use cleaner sources of fuel, you know. And I believe a whole lot of countries pay lip service to climate change. It's all must and steam and no action. You have countries that sign up to the Paris Protocol, the global accords, and they are doing nothing about it. Let's take, for instance, climate change, and then let's just use Lagos, Nigeria, all right, as a sample, all right. We have rainfall, perennial rainfall, and the whole of Lagos is flooded. And we know that this rainfall are coming. We know that the water level is increasing. What have we done about that in the past 2-3 years? Lagos is a coastal city. We continue to have the warning that the ocean level is rising. What have we done about that? Look at the people that build houses in Lekki. Basically, we are still filling the Lagos Lagoon to build properties on, in a place where we are hearing that the ocean is rising. What have we done about that? So we're saying climate change. I'll use Abuja, where Egogo stays, for instance. How many trees has the FCTA planted this year? So we have a whole lot of government saying, oh yes, there's climate change, we are looking at transitioning, but the question is, how are you handling it? We're handling it poorly. That's the answer. It's being handled poorly. I would like to see more action. I would like to see visible and measurable actions saying that, oh, this is what we've done, this is what we've done, this is what we've done, not just paying lip service to it. During the Goodluck Jonathan administration, we had what we call the Great Green Wall, all right, that was meant to reduce desertification in the north. As of today, where's that project? We can't continue to say we want to stop something and then we are sleeping on it. So yes, it's been handled poorly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Afolabi. I'll give the floor to Ms. Owo to also contribute to that question. I think Angel also, okay, just finish before we take the live question from Angel.
Okay. And honestly, I think Afolabi has really, gotten to the heart of the issue. It's a very political topic, very political, and people can come out, when they're in public and say a certain thing. But in reality, their actions, are on the opposite end. Honestly, I'm just thinking about the whole issue, and I'm like, the energy transition is not happening. What we are having is what people now call energy security. So people, especially from the global north, the narrative has moved from, energy transition, we're moving from fossil fuel to renewables. Now they're saying, it's no longer energy transition, it's now energy security. We need to make sure that there is energy to power our homes, and so that's why we're restarting our coal plants. That's why we're investing heavily in nuclear power. That's why we're now investing in drilling new wells. For BP to say that, that's like a big deal, So at the global level, the energy transition really has really derailed. And of course, a huge contributor, I would say, to that derailment is this Russia-Ukraine crisis and the availability, which has impacted the availability of gas, supplied to Europe, because they're no longer doing business with Russia. At least that's what they tell us. But we are very sure that there are some back channels, but that's another story. So that has created, or that has brought the issue of energy security to the forefront rather than energy transition. So I don't think the energy transition is happening. I think the argument or the narrative that the global north, who actually drive the global politics, they are now saying it's all about energy security, it's all about energy security. So I think that's what we're going to be seeing more about policies that drive energy security, because you're even seeing government, as much as the US is also, especially the Democratic Party, they're also very pro, energy transition, climate change issues. But you're seeing Biden, telling oil companies to increase their production so that the price of crude oil will come down. You're seeing governments telling their companies to drill more wells, and companies are actually drilling more wells. So the transition has derailed. I still think the existential threat hasn't gone away just because there's a Russian, Ukraine crisis. But I think what we're doing is, like my friend would say, we're just kicking the bucket, and we're kicking it to see where it stops or where it ends. We're pushing today's problem to tomorrow because we already have enough problems on our plates for today. That will create a bigger problem in future, because like they say, a stitch in time saves 9. So when we do not stitch in time, in essence, when we do not efficiently transition, even if gradual, when we're changing the narrative from transition to security, and like Afolabi said, we are paying lip service even to our transition goals and all. We're just pushing the problem, to the future, but that problem is real, and that environmental problem is something that, is definitely happening, whether we are making changes, in our consumption or operations or not.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Obo, and also Mr. Falabi. We'll be taking our last question from Angel Egede.
Okay.
You can ask your question.
Okay, good afternoon, ma'am, sir. I'm audible, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, ma Ugogon, right? Egogon. So
Yes.
I wanted to ask, yes, okay. I want to understand. You're saying that energy transitioning should be more gradual, right? Because even if we want to use cleaner sources of energy, we don't have enough infrastructures and the money. And then since the country's main source of revenue is oil, crude oil, so it's better we just continue using what we have. Then when we have such infrastructures and the money and everything, we can then divert to transitioning. Because if I kind of understand your point and the demerit, especially if we're trying to if companies are no more drilling oil and then there's less oil, the prices of fossil fuel is definitely going to increase. So I'm just saying, is your point towards just us relying on what we have already, and then it doesn't mean we are going to ignore the climate or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And that really is the concern when we talk about the energy dilemma, which is short-term survival versus long-term sustainability.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you get? And whichever way you go, you have a problem. So that's why it's a dilemma. So we have a problem. But what I'm saying is, first of all, we have real problems in Nigeria that if we take a radical approach, we are going to compound those economic problems. So what we should be thinking about, and I think what the government is also pushing, with certain policies around crude proceeds utilization and the crude oil sector generally, is to make the oil sector drive economic growth. So what we had in the past was many of these oil companies and even Nigerian companies, that operated in the oil sector, when they produce crude, they export it, right? And the money doesn't come back.
Yeah.
It goes to foreign accounts in Cayman, it goes to international partners. It goes out, it doesn't come back. So what the government over, I think about 4 years now, the CBN now had a policy to say, oh, if you sell crude, all the money must come back. So that's the first step. But it's not just for all the money to come back. Are we utilizing our resources? And resources meaning, for example, local contractors. Are we using our local contractors? Are we employing Nigerians? Because if all your staff are foreigners, then the money will still go out.
Yeah.
So government then puts in policies to say, oh no, you must have at this particular level, all your staff must be Nigerians. If this skill is available in country, you have to use it. If these contractors, are available to do this job in country, you have to give them priority. So all these policies were put in place to make the oil and gas sector a driver of economic growth. So the idea is that economic growth will be happening as we are transitioning. If you get what I mean. So as the oil and gas sector is driving commerce, the oil and gas sector is driving infrastructure, the oil and gas sector is improving the livelihood, the standard of living of people, the country is getting richer, then we now have extra income to do other things. Do you get what I mean? So now you have extra income to invest in renewables. You have extra income to put in other sectors. But where the oil and gas sector is not able to enable or to unlock other economic, potentials that are hidden or unlocked, then you have a problem. So that's why I'm saying as much as we are looking at short-term survival and we are saying let's focus on, harnessing the oil and gas resources that we have, we need to make sure that the oil and gas sector is enabling economic growth and prosperity. Do you get? Where the resources and the gains and the benefits from our oil and gas exploration and production is retained in country. Once it is retained in country, then we can have prosperity. The major reason why the prosperity is not retained in country is because of this thing called subsidy from importation of processed of PMS, because our crude is not refined in country. Let's not even talk about that Dangote refinery and all the issues associated. But generally, the concept of refining in country is one way to also retain, the benefits of this oil and gas production in country. Because generally speaking, if the price of crude oil is going up and we are the people selling or producing crude oil, we should be prospering in these times. But we are not, because what we gain upstream, we lose downstream. Because we sell this crude out maybe $76 or $80, I'm not sure what it's selling for now. And it goes at a cost. When it's coming back refined, it's a much expensive commodity than you sold. Hence the need for the government to subsidize and all that. And then it's just a big mess. So the government now needs to push policies. First of all, deregulate the entire downstream. Do you get? Let's remove the subsidies. Let people go into the market. By the time you remove subsidies, you realize that many companies that would sell their crude will probably be refining the crude and selling it in country because they know that they will get their money. And the more those resources, by the time you're building refineries, you're building, infrastructure and things that can support, the refining or the petrochemicals, industries like that, you're creating jobs, you're creating economic prosperity. And that is one way we can transition, but we can still have a better economy than if we just say, oh no, the West has said no more crude oil production, and then we just shut down, but we don't have a backup. So right now, our plan should be, let's use our oil and gas resources to unlock our economic potentials. As the economy prospers, we can now invest, and even attract investment in these, renewable sectors. And then we'll hopefully be able to achieve our long-term sustainability, along the line. I don't know if this explanation helps, but it's a problem because anywhere you go, whether you choose short-term survival or you choose long-term sustainability, it will have effects or demerits based on the previous question. So it's a dilemma, really.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Obo and Mr. Falabi, for the time here today with us and mentoring us on the topic. I believe myself and the mentees on the call have learned a whole lot regarding energy crisis in Africa and the world, the global world. Okay. I will say a very big thank you to our mentors and also the mentees, to Joel for the presentation and the whole group for coming up with the teamwork and research and making that presentation. With this, we've come to the end of the program for today. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a nice weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Ms. Obo. Bye-bye.